Hello, this is Cassandra Jenkins with the Florida Agency for Persons with Disabilities. Thank you for joining me today. On behalf of Governor Ron DeSantis and APD Director Barbara Palmer, I want to thank you for joining me on this presentation regarding zero tolerance, stopping the silent epidemic. APD, or otherwise known as the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, has zero tolerance for abuse, neglect, exploitation, and sexual misconduct committed against individuals with disabilities. In addition, as a part of the overall effort to address this silent epidemic, the APD has a zero tolerance initiative. And as a part of this initiative, we're taking a comprehensive approach to preventing, detecting, reporting, and responding to incidents of abuse, neglect, and exploitation and sexual misconduct committed against individuals that we work with. Our goal as part of this presentation is to provide information on how we can work together to address the silent epidemic of abuse and neglect and exploitation committed against individuals with developmental disabilities. We want to have a coordinated effort internally within APD, as well as with our external partners, you, to prevent or deter incidents of abuse, neglect, and exploitation before it begins. We also want to make sure if these incidents or crimes do occur, that we work together to ensure they are reported immediately and responded to swiftly. We have many laws that deal with that define and describe abuse, neglect, and exploitation. These are just some of the primary ones that we use as we work through our zero tolerance initiative. What does the data say, and why do we call this a silent epidemic? Statistics reveal that individuals with disabilities are twice as likely to be victims of violent victimization as people without disabilities. Individuals with intellectual disabilities are sexually assaulted at 7 times the rate of people without intellectual disabilities. It's a crime that goes unrecognized and unpunished, hence the silent epidemic. This chart from the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics through their National Crime Victimization Survey shows that persons with disabilities are victimized more by violent crimes and violent situations. This chart also shows in terms of frequency of bullying, which is also a type of incident and could be a type of crime, shows that people with intellectual or developmental disabilities are more likely to be bullied. We also have to deal with the issue of financial exploitation. The financial exploitation affects senior citizens, but it also affects individuals with intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities, and they're more likely to be victimized by financial exploitation. 90% of the exploiters are family members or trusted other individuals, and 1 of 44 cases of financial abuse is reported. So if only 1 in 44 is reported, that means 43 are not reported, hence, again, the silent epidemic. Examples of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, just so we can understand and recognize these situations as we possibly see them. We have verbal abuse, mental injury, emotional stress, sexual abuse, physical abuse, cyberbullying, withholding food and medication, that is a type of abuse and neglect. Leaving individuals unattended with no way to call for help. Taking individuals' money or property for personal use and not for use of the individual themselves. This is a type of exploitation. Common characteristics of people living with disabilities. People with developmental disabilities are more likely to experience different types of abuse and neglect, which is more severe and lasts for longer periods of time. Again, I'll repeat that. It's more severe and lasts for longer periods of time. Often there are multiple and repeated perpetrators, meaning that they're victimized over and over and over again. It's more frequent abuse, and unfortunately, they have difficulty escaping abusive situations, finding justice, or getting services because they fear retribution. They fear that they can't take care of themselves, so they have difficulty escaping these abusive situations. I will now play a public service message that I think will also give you information that will be helpful in terms of recognizing and how we can work together to address this.
We are all human beings, and we all have a right to live a life without abuse and without someone having power and control over us. There are different forms of abuse, like financial, physical, psychological, sexual, domestic, and people with disabilities need to work together to appreciate each other protect themselves from abuse. Because people who are abused don't want to talk about it. The abusers make the person who's being abused be quiet and not report to authorities, and the cycle keeps going on. People don't always have the words to express what happened to them. We all need to learn how to report abuse to authorities. Some of the action steps that I myself am taking, I'm using social media like Facebook, Twitter, some advocacy groups, work directives, safety councils, writing and emailing and educating our state legislators to have tougher laws about abuse. I'm writing blogs and editorials and doing community presentations, working with self-advocacy groups to talk about abuse of vulnerable individuals and how it can be stopped. Share your experience and what you did to prevent abuse for yourself or your peers with disabilities. And share this video with everyone in your network so we can get the word out and improve the lives of all people with disabilities, and those who are being abused will have it stop and live more healthy and happy lives. And most important, we must work together to protect each other. Our voices and through our actions will end the physical problem.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit about human trafficking. The Florida statutes refer to human trafficking as a form of modern day slavery. There are different types of human trafficking that we will talk about today. I just want to share some of that information with you. First of all, it's not just sexual abuse or sexual exploitation, human trafficking. There are different forms of human trafficking. First, there's labor trafficking, agriculture, hospitality, and tourism industry, which is very large here in the state of Florida, as well as factory labor and construction labor. We also have domestic servitude, uh, people serving as nannies or childcare workers, live-in maids, cooks, landscapers, and the one that we most frequently refer to is sexual exploitation, human trafficking, prostitution, pornography, exotic dancing, massage parlors. In addition to those type of abuses, some other types of trafficking include organ trafficking, where people involuntarily have their organs donated, and involuntary or illegal adoptions. And so we also have to look at those kind of things in terms of organ donations and illegal adoptions. So those are other types of human trafficking we have to be aware of. Can you spot human trafficking? I will play this video for you now to see if you can spot human trafficking.
Over
20.9 million men, women, and children are victims of human trafficking. But do you know what human trafficking actually is? In a small, sleepy town, people are dreaming. But not everyone's dreams will come true. Human traffickers prey on people's dreams and lure them away for their own benefit. How do they do this? Human trafficking doesn't happen all of a sudden. It's a process. First, traffickers act. This includes recruiting victims, transporting them to the place where they'll be exploited, hiding them from authorities, and receiving victims from other traffickers. So why don't the victims run away or say no? Because traffickers use different means. This includes threatening or forcing victims to do what they want, abducting or deceiving the victims, and abusing power. Sometimes traffickers promise small payments or benefits to get the victim to cooperate. And why are the traffickers doing this? The purpose of trafficking is exploitation. Traffickers take advantage of victims for their own profit or benefit. This is human trafficking. This man's neighbor tells him that he has a great job for him on a very safe construction site and that he'll be paid a lot of money. With more money, he can make his dreams come true. He agrees to take the job. A few days later, the neighbor's friend picks him up and they drive to the construction site. It's a very long way from his home. This man is put to work immediately, without any training or protective equipment, without enough to eat or drink, and with very few breaks. After many months, he's only been paid a fraction of what he was promised. He knows he's been tricked, but he doesn't have enough money to get home. This man is a victim of human trafficking. He was recruited by his neighbor and tricked into thinking he was going to work at a safe construction site for fair pay. Instead, was forced to work long hours in unsafe conditions for almost no money, while others benefited from his exploitation. One day, while looking for jobs online, this woman comes across an opportunity to work in a restaurant in a big city. Her application is successful, and her new employer arranges for her travel there. She is met at the airport and driven to a part of the city that looks nothing like she expected. The car pulls up to a building. The door is shut and locked behind her. She is made to perform sex acts against her will. She is trapped. This woman is a victim of human trafficking. She was transported by a trafficker from the airport to the location of the job. When she arrived at the location and realized it was not the restaurant job she was expecting, the traffickers used force to keep her there. She was then exploited for forced sex work. This 14-year-old boy on school break is approached on the street by a woman who looks trustworthy. She tells him that she needs workers at her factory, and she promises him lots of money. He brings her to meet his parents. They are so happy for him. He'll now be able to save money for school. The woman drives him to the next town. They pull up to an old building. There is someone waiting for him. As he is led inside, the nice lady drives off. The factory isn't anything like she described. There are lots of people working, including many children. He works all day, and after just a few hours of sleep, he starts again. He is sad. This isn't what he expected. He misses his family. After weeks, he still hasn't received any salary or been allowed to contact them. He is trapped. This boy is a victim of human trafficking. He was tricked by the woman who recruited him on the street. He was then received by a trafficker when he arrived at the factory and exploited by being forced to sew clothing. For anyone under the age of 18, only the act and purpose matter for it to legally be a case of human trafficking. Understanding that human trafficking doesn't happen all at once, but instead is a process of act, means, and purpose, helps us better identify victims and trafficking trends. People everywhere are dreaming and looking for opportunities to make those dreams come true. Human trafficking is happening all around us. Will you recognize it when you see it? To learn more, visit iomx.org.
Thank you very much for viewing that video with me. Now I'll talk a little bit about cyberbullying and how individuals with developmental disabilities are abused and sometimes exploited through social media. Cyberbullying occurs on social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. And a lot of the individuals we work with here at the Agency for Persons with Disabilities and throughout the community do have access to these various forms of social media. So we want to address this issue as well. Social media safety. This is something that you need to be aware of as individuals who work with individuals that have possible intellectual or developmental disabilities, but also individuals or our customers and clients with developmental disabilities need to also understand social media safety. You need to work with them and make sure they understand and are educated about social media safety. If it's private, do not post it. Once a comment or picture is posted, it's in cyberspace forever. Even if you try to delete it, once it's out there, it's there forever. Don't accept friend requests from people you don't know. Even if they try to trick you, don't accept friend requests if you don't know them. Report any harassing or abusive content to the social media provider, a trusted family member, friend, or law enforcement. This is something we have to reinforce with the individuals we work with. And caregivers, it's important that you monitor the online activity of individuals with disabilities to ensure their safety and well-being. Cell phone safety. Again, never give out personal information over the phone, verbally, or via text. Show the individuals that you work with how to properly use the phone, as well as the security measures that can be used to protect their privacy and information. Again, monitor their usage to ensure that the individuals are not participating in unhealthy device usage. Teach responsibility by letting individuals know that the cell phone is not a toy. Teach emergency precautions. Cell phone safety is important, and a lot of our friends and individuals we work with that have developmental disabilities do have access to cell phone and use them often. Instead of being a bystander, be an upstander against bullying. This is very important as we try to teach and train individuals, including our own children, about these type of issues. More than 50% of bullying situations stop when a peer intervenes. I'm going to now show you this video on being an upstander against bullying.
One in five children in the United States experience bullying, where a peer harasses, humiliates, or threatens repeatedly. Bullying can have negative psychological, physical, and academic effects. It can contribute to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and it can be isolating. Most kids are not directly involved in bullying. They are a witness or a bystander to bullying. Sometimes bystanders get roped into reinforcing the bullying. This can make the situation worse and more traumatic. However, if a bystander becomes an upstander, then something really cool happens. When bystanders to bullying intervene, bullying stops within 10 seconds, 57% of the time. Think about it. If bystanders became upstanders every time there was a bullying incident, more than half of all kids would be spared a prolonged harmful experience, and they would feel the support of a peer. Kids with strong leadership qualities and who are self-assured are more likely to be on the defender role. So you are really like a peer superhero when you become an upstander. There are a number of ways you can shift the negative focus of bullying. Change the subject, interrupt, question behavior, use humor to lighten up a serious situation, embrace your differences, report bullying and block cyberbullying, protect others and show kindness and empathy, and include others in what you are doing. Every time you stand up and stick up for others, you are making a positive difference and helping a peer who may really need a friend. To learn more about bullying prevention, visit stopbullying.gov.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about abuser characteristics and profiles and signs of abuse. So we can, again, make sure we understand, recognize these situations when we see them or suspect that it's occurring. Majority of individuals living with disabilities are victimized in their family homes and by members of their family or trusted individuals. I'll repeat that. Where do most incidents of abuse occur? The majority occur within their family homes, and they're often victimized by members of their family or trusted individuals. So these are the things we need to be aware of. Characteristics of an abuser. It can really be anyone. They can represent any racial, religious, or socioeconomic group. Most frequently, it's male abusers if it's sexual abuse, but not all the time. Are usually known to the victim, as we talked about earlier, and can be of any age. Also, you need to be aware that anyone with a history of being an abuser is at high risk of repeating the offense either on the same individual or someone else. So we need to be aware of that as well. Now we're going to talk about some profiles of caregivers who abuse and neglect. So you can also be aware of these situations if you're ever confronted with them. In terms of profile of caregivers who abuse and neglect, they're often unable to provide care due to lack of proper training or experience being overly stressed or tired, and they unfortunately take it out on the individuals they're working with. They may see their role as an opportunity to take advantage of someone who may not be able to defend themselves or report the problem. Behavior of caregivers who may be abusers, refusal to follow directions or complete necessary personal tasks for the dependent person, using their vehicle, money, or other resources without consent, using threat or menacing looks or body language as a form of intimidation, and unfortunately displaying an unwelcome, uncooperative attitude during home visits. Some of you may have experienced that. Speaks for the person with the developmental disability, taking control without letting them talk for themselves. Abusers may also have low self-esteem, may also be dealing with their own mental health issues, have a need to control others. They're frustrated with authority, so they take it out on a weakened person, or a lack of attachment to the dependent person. These are things we need to be aware of as well as we deal with and work with individuals with developmental disabilities. If you had to choose the one thing that would be the most important indicator of abuse, what would it be? If you said change, you're absolutely correct. The most single important thing to look for in a person with developmental disability to indicate the possibility of abuse or exploitation is change. A sudden or gradual change in appearance or behavior should always be monitored and noted. Again, a sudden change or gradual change in appearance or behavior should be noted and monitored. Signs of abuse. There are different signs of abuse. Some are outward in terms of bruises or burns or scrapes, frequently or unexplained injuries, but we also have the sudden and unexplained changes in behavior or physical condition. Incontinence in someone who was previously continent. So there are different signs of abuse, and every situation is not the same. So you need to be aware of some of the more frequent signs that we see. Distinguishing abuse from accidental injury. Things you might want to consider: the location of the injury, the number and frequency of the injuries, the type, the size and shape of the injury, the consistency of the injury with the person's developmental capability. Is it something unusual for them in terms of the injury and where it occurred? Those are the things you need to think about as you think about distinguishing abuse from accidental injury. Factors that make it hard for you to recognize abuse or exploitation. The victim does not recognize abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Sometimes they're tricked into thinking that what's happening to them is okay and the behavior that's being perpetrated against them is okay. Sometimes they don't recognize it. Communication challenges. Sometimes the individuals have difficulty speaking or explaining exactly what's occurring to them, even though they think it's wrong and they're not comfortable with it. They might not be able to communicate what they are feeling or what's happening to them. Sometimes it might be self-abusive behaviors, or some symptoms may be interpreted as behavioral problems or traits related to the disability. So we need to be aware of the individuals that we work with, love, and care for, so we can see those differences and those changes if they're happening. But always, If you're not sure, it's not up to you to investigate or figure out what's going on. If you see it or suspect it, you should report it and not try to do your own investigations. Conditions that may look like abuse or neglect. Injuries due to falls. Unfortunately, some of our clients do have balance issues and frequently fall. Sensory impairments. Skin breakdown from appliances or orthopedic equipment they might be wearing. Poor growth, but it's not due to failure to thrive. Bruises from taking certain medications, such as blood thinners. Mongolian spots, which occur sometimes in the eyes, and sensory integration problems. So there are conditions that look like abuse or neglect, but if you're not sure, report it, and those individuals that are responsible for investigating abuse and neglect, then they can look at it and determine what the situation might be. Never not report because you're not sure. In fact, you should report and then let the professionals take care of it. Prevention methods. What can we do to work together to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation? Again, this is a big part of stopping the epidemic we've been talking about. Research shows that the single most effective way to prevent abuse, neglect, exploitation, and sexual misconduct is by providing education, self-protection training, and information directly to individuals with disabilities. Again, research shows that the single most effective way to prevent abuse, neglect, exploitation, and sexual misconduct is by providing education, self-protection training, and information directly to individuals with disabilities. Again, information is power. Training and education. We'll talk a little bit about some training and education, not only for the individuals we work with, and care for, but for ourselves as well. We want people to focus on community and public awareness. We try as much as we can to work with other organizations within the communities, advocacy organizations, to make sure the community and the public are aware of these issues and make them more informed about what they can do to affect those issues. Expansion in social circles. A lot of times the individuals we work with are isolated, so they don't have people around to see what's happening to them or to see changes in their appearance or behavior. But the more people they're exposed to in a positive way, the more people in the social circle and can identify and report suspected cases of abuse or exploitation if they see it, because they're around that individual. So the big issue here is making sure the people we work with are allowed to have access to other individuals in recreational work situations or other things of that sort. Training on appropriate and inappropriate behaviors by both caregivers and service providers. Education on how and when to report the problem to others. Setting boundaries. We need to teach our individuals we work with about setting boundaries and the fact that their body is their body, and they should understand when it's appropriate if they're being cared for versus when it's inappropriate and being abused or exploited. Are you a mandatory reporter? If you answered yes, you're correct. Everyone is a mandatory reporter, and that's something we need to make sure we understand. Everyone is a mandatory reporter, including me as an employee or working for a state agency, you as a caregiver or a provider, but also family members. Family members and the clients and customers themselves are mandatory reporters. And so that's the reason it's important to make sure they're informed and educated about what's appropriate and inappropriate, as well as what they need to do to report. And if the individual is not in a position to report for themselves, then you as a family member, friend, caregiver, or a state agency employee, it's up to you to report for them or help them to report. How do I report abuse and neglect? There's a lot of different ways to report abuse and neglect. Through telephone, and if you don't know it, 1-800-96-ABUSE. I'll repeat that, 1-800-96-ABUSE puts you straight into the Florida Abuse Hotline. You can fax the report in, or you can do an online report through DCF's online reporting site. What is stopping victims from reporting? We talked about this a little bit already, but victims do not know where to turn to for help, and they're often isolated. So again, expanding their social circles will make sure they're not isolated. Physical or cognitive impairments make it difficult for victims to seek help. They might not be able to use the phone and not provided access to the phone. So in this situation, you should make sure you help them make the report or make the report on their behalf. Victims may believe they are financially or otherwise dependent on the abuser for their needs. They're often told by the abuser, "Without me, you wouldn't be here. Without me, you would be dead. You need me." And so you can't report it, because if you report it, then you won't have anybody to care for you. Those are the things we need to be aware of. Person with disabilities may feel their report of abuse will not be believed because of their disability. They often are treated as if they've making it up or they don't understand what happened. So they feel they won't be believed. Your response to a victim should always communicate, "I believe you. It's not your fault. You are not alone, and I want to help you." And then when you respond to the victim in this way, actually do something to help them. To learn more about our Zero Tolerance Initiative and how we want to stop the epidemic of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of individuals with disabilities, go to our website, apdcares.org. Again, it's apdcares.org, and visit our Zero Tolerance portion of the website. You can get more information here, and you can also download our APD Zero Tolerance brochure. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, I'm Cassandra Jenkins with the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or need assistance with anything you're focusing on. Again, thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much for participating. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you as we try to stop this silent epidemic of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of individuals with developmental disabilities and disabilities. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And take care and have a blessed day.